slow braised pork, simmering in tomato sauce, infused with guanciale fat, fresh rigatoni and crispy guanciale, and pecorino romano. Straight from my most recent episode of Sunday Supper, this is my pork sugo amatriciana. And it starts with some pork. Now what we have here is a boneless pork butt. And I know a lot of you just go into the store, you see a pork butt, and you just grab any one. And I don't want you to do that. Now this is a pretty large piece of pork. I don't really need all of this, but what I did see was this muscle right here. In barbecue, it's what they call the money muscle. This is like the most prized part of a pulled pork. And then also on this side, you've got this really nice fatty piece of meat. A pork butt is lots of different muscles, right? So some are leaner, some are fattier, and a pulled pork sandwich is beautiful because it mixes all those things together. So like for this, say we cut this in half, I'm really just gonna kind of cube this up. So we have big pieces to sear, but then we want to kind of cook them so that they break down. That's how long we're gonna cook these guys. Yeah, that's probably about 3 pounds of meat. That should be enough for this recipe. By the way, I'm recovering from a nasty sinus infection, so if I sound weird, I apologize. So what we're gonna do is just get these onto a paper towel, get them nice and dry. Best if you could do this a day ahead of time, get them nice and salted, seasoned, and sit in the fridge. They'll get nice and dry. They become really easy to sear. Just gonna make sure they're nice and dry. Then we're just gonna season them up real nice. Again, this is always better a day ahead, but we can do it same day. Now we can just set these aside, let these kind of soak in that salt for a minute. Now this little Roman mashup that I've come up with is something you've never had because I made it up. As you know, amatriciana is my favorite pasta, which is basically some pureed tomatoes flavored by the fat of guanciale, along with some crisp guanciale mixed in, and some pecorino, a staple of the 4 Roman pastas. Now I got my new blend of tomatoes here. It's my Bianco di Napoli's. These are West Coast American, super sunny, which means we're gonna get a super sweet tomato. It's my go-to domestic tomato. Then I've also found this new can, this Agro Sonese San Marzano. This is much more minerally, something that like when you smell it and when you taste it, it's more earthy, it's more acidic, but it's like not too acidic, it's balanced. This is a very Italian tomato. I like to now blend the two. And I'm just gonna run them through my food mill to puree them. Now the birth of this recipe sort of came from a bunch of trips to Rome and my need to develop new menu items for my Sunday supper that are like something unique to me. So I figured I could serve sort of a bit of a new take on amatriciana, one that adds more pork, braised slowly like a sugo in the tomato sauce, infused with the fat of the guanciale, like amatriciana, to make like a deeper, more rich version of an amatriciana, just with more pork. It turned out to be a hit. If you haven't watched that episode, link's gonna be down in the description. And to understand this, you have to understand the connection between Rome and Umbria. Umbria borders Rome to the north, and it has this strong agriculture and pig butchering culture. It's known as Norcineria. Roman chefs would visit Umbria to like learn the skills of these pig butchers, learn how to make guanciale, coppa, and this magical salami called ciauscolo. It's this soft, spreadable salami that, I'm not kidding, is the single greatest bite of food I've ever had. Rome, like Umbria, revere the pig. So that's what this recipe is about, an Italian celebration of a pig. So just making sure we get all that good stuff out of those tomatoes. Next up, we've got guanciale, the key to the Roman pastas, key to amatriciana, carbonara, alla gricia, and is one of those things Roman chefs would go to Umbria for to learn at a Norcineria how to do. So I'm just gonna cut this in half. And so it's got this kind of like pellicle on the outside that we just kind of wanna cut that thin layer off. Sometimes it comes with like a black pepper, or in this case, some herbs, and those herbs are just gonna burn. So we wanna get it all off. Take a piece like that, cut that down the middle, and these will shrink kind of by half, but I do wanna end up with some thick pieces. Whoever made this piece of guanciale did not study from the Norcineria, I'll tell you that much. It's got slits and cuts all over it, like what is that? Now, in hindsight, looking back, that sinus infection must have foggied up my brain because these pieces of guanciale, while edible, they're just a little bit too big for what I was intending. So go about half this size for a more reasonable bite. These actually still ended up being kind of perfect in the end, just a little bit too big. So over here, we got the Amatriciana section of the world. We got the tomatoes, the guanciale, the pecorino, and there's some black pepper in the mix too. And then over here, we've got the pork sugo edition. And then we got a few other Steve American editions that go at the end. I don't usually add a wine to a matriciana, but since we're browning a bunch of stuff, it's kind of useful, and I don't have any white wine, so just imagine that this vodka is white wine, but if you don't have white wine either, vodka is a great thing to replace it. It just doesn't add the flavor and acidity kind of that wine does, but I kind of just want to pick up the stuff from the pan, and vodka and tomato go together, so. Grab your best Dutch oven, and over to the stove. Now we're gonna get a Dutch oven on medium heat. It's gonna be the pot that we cook all of our sauce in. Then we can go ahead and add in the guanciale to a cool pan. And we're just gonna allow that heat to slowly render that fat out and then eventually crisp up the guanciale. Now, one thing to note about a thicker cut of guanciale is it doesn't get as crisp and brittle as a smaller piece of guanciale does. It gets crisp, but there's still a tender meatiness inside of the guanciale. The benefit of cutting them up a little bit finer, maybe into like thinner strips, is that it can kind of infuse more throughout the sauce, which might be something you want to go for. So after a while, that guanciale is starting to brown, the fat is rendering, we can sort of pull it in the corner and just sort of finish up that final crisp of the guanciale. Once it's nice and crisp, we can spoon it out of the pan. And we're gonna keep that guanciale fat in the pan and use that to sear our pork shoulder. Just go ahead and add a nice even layer, no overcrowding of the pork shoulder, and try and get as much surface area of the pork on the pan to develop as much color as we can. You just wanna keep them on a medium heat and allow them to slowly brown on all sides. We don't need to worry about overcooking them. We're gonna intentionally overcook the pork. So you don't need to sear these super fast and hot. You wanna create a nice moderate heat and just be patient with it. Once that first side starts to develop some cover, we're just gonna give them a flip and repeat on that other side. Once you got all sides basically brown, then I just start kind of flipping them back and forth, just trying to harden the sear on all sides. The deeper the sear you get on the meat, the more flavor you're gonna have in this dish. And be mindful that once we add the tomatoes, that sort of deep brown sort of starts to fade, so you can almost go a bit deeper than you think. The moisture is sort of gonna dampen it once we get everything in the pot. That first batch is seared. Any leftover bits, get it into the pan, sear those off the same way as the first batch. And then once they're all seared, we can get them all back into the pot. In that pot now, we've got fat from pork shoulder and fat from guanciale. And what we would just want to do is deglaze the fond on that pan. You could use wine. In my case, we're using a little bit of vodka because that's all I have today. Once that vodka is in there and has reduced down a bit and has deglazed the bottom of that pan, then we go ahead and we add in our tomatoes. Now, I kept the cans, right? And I'm just gonna rinse them in some water, pass them through each other, and then add it to that bowl and just make sure we get every last bit of tomato in there. And even though the tomatoes are at a really nice consistency as is, we don't want it to over thicken during the cooking process. So we add a little bit of water to overcompensate for the reduction and the long cooking process that's gonna occur. Then we just mix that all together, bring that up to a boil. We're gonna place a lid on it, but we're just gonna crack the lid slightly to allow for some evaporation to occur. Lower that heat down to a simmer, and then we're going to cook this for 3 hours. Now that our sauce is almost done, to finish this pasta, we're gonna use our trusty and most beloved pans in our kitchen, the stainless steel pans from Made In. Specifically, the 3-quart saucier, which is my favorite pan of all time. Now, I've been using Made In for years. They They designed some of the most professional quality products for the home cook that you could buy. This is stuff made from multi-generational factories and artisans, and they have like the widest selection of high quality things in the exact style and build that just speaks to me. Made in stainless clad pans are crafted in Italy and made from a premium 5-ply stainless steel material, which allows for superior heat retention, even heating, and ease of heat control. And look, I've said this 1,000 times. Good stainless steel is good stainless steel. To me, what separates a pan is its handles. Some are too round, which makes them wobbly, and some are too sharp, and they just hurt your hand when you hold them. But Maiden's is just right. And with a thing like the saucier, what makes it so special and so great for pastas in particular is the curvature of the walls, the ability to hold things in while you're tossing and finishing a pasta. I use it in almost every pasta video, and if you want to get one yourself, head on down to the link in my description. You want to make sure while this is cooking, you go and stir it occasionally, make sure nothing's sticking at the bottom. And after 2 hours, what I like to do is go in and I'm gonna take a potato masher and I'm gonna start trying to just begin to process and break down that pork shoulder into smaller pieces, make that final hour cooking process speed up a bit. And my goal is to eventually get all of that meat to naturally shred up in that pot into these little shreds. Now it's been cooking for 3 hours total. We're gonna go back in with the masher and just process any big chunks we feel in there. It's also gonna allow those strands to just absorb all of that flavor, so that beautiful flavor runs all throughout that pork. We just wanna give it a taste, check for seasoning. Could use just a touch of salt, but that's up to you. That guanciale fat is salty, remember that. And then of course for Amatriciana, we're gonna add a little bit of black pepper in there. Now this is beautiful as is, but I like to add a few finishing touches just to throw in a bit of my Italian American in there. First, we're gonna go in with maybe like a tablespoon or two, just a little bit of cream to just adjust the color into like a little pink sort of ragu. Then to finish it, we're gonna chop up some cold butter and just mount it. Stir it in there, get that butter melted in, just give the sauce a bit of a glaze. Give it one last check, and remember that we're going to add pecorino at the end, so it's gonna be an additional salty element, so just adjust the seasoning accordingly. Now we're ready to cook the pasta. So we wanna salt our water. Again, remembering the salt content running through this dish, so don't go too crazy. And here we've got some fresh rigatoni, something I like to serve this dish with. And we're gonna add about 100 to 120 grams of it for one portion to the pot. Next up, I've got my trusty saucier, my favorite pasta pot. I'm gonna transfer some of that sauce into the saucier, turn the heat up, and just get that simmering while the pasta cooks. Since we've got the fresh rigatoni, it should only cook for 2-3 minutes, and we do want it to cook a bit in that sauce. So once it starts floating, I'll just give one a taste, and if it's just shy under al dente, I'm gonna transfer it into the ragu. And then I'm just gonna add a touch of pasta water, and then we're gonna start to work the pasta. This is marrying the sauce with the rigatoni, allowing time for that rigatoni to absorb the flavor of the sauce and not just kind of toss it and plate it. It's also a time where you're like assessing the consistency. How dry is the pasta? How wet is it? Do I need a little bit more pasta water? Go ahead and add a little bit. You don't want it swimming in sauce, but you do want a flowy sauce that's coating the noodles. And this is the time when you're making your final adjustments to achieve that. One final taste. The pasta is nice and al dente. We're gonna add a bit of cheese right now. So I'm gonna take a little bit of pasta water, add it to the pasta just to give enough liquid in there for that cheese to melt creamy into the pasta. And then we're just gonna start to add a couple handfuls at a time, toss and stir the pasta until that cheese just melts throughout the pasta. Not stringy, it just incorporates beautifully into the sauce. And to me, that looks like a beautiful thing. One last thing to do, toss a few of those guanciale cubes back in, work that into the pasta, leave a few for garnish, and we're ready to plate. We're gonna use a bowl and we're gonna just pile a bunch of that rigatoni in the center. We're gonna place some of those thick guanciale cubes, or thin if you choose, right on top. After the guanciale, I'm gonna take a bit of that fat that's sort of just been accumulating, and I'm gonna drizzle it on top of the pasta, much like you would finishing a pasta with olive oil. And we're just gonna finish it with a little bit more cheese. The flavors of Rome in a pasta with just a little touch of Steve blended throughout. Now, you might say to yourself, oh, you might lose the flavor of guanciale and all those other ingredients. This is just pork on pork on pork. That guanciale is cut thick, And it's crisp, but it's not killed. It's still spongy and soft. There's meatiness and life in it. That mixed with the super soft meat and the sauce, everything you love about Rome in one pasta. This is one of those like light ragus, those slow cooking meals that actually is kind of nice in the summer too. If you want this recipe, link's gonna be down in the description. You gotta join my cooking school over on Patreon. Enrollment is now. We've got some amazing lessons over there in an entirely new style and format from this show. Way more interactive, direct access to me. It's a fun time. Head on over to Patreon, check out my new cooking school, the home school for home cooks. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.